Chapter 1. Rebirth. If you truly wish to help people, becoming a doctor or a police officer are equally noble pursuits. The words came from his sunken lips easily. The speaker was a gaunt, haggard-looking man. He was skinny to the point of looking like skin and bones, and his lankiness and overly long limbs made him look sickly. His dull, spiky yellow hair hung limply on his strangely angular head in a disheveled mess, with two long bangs coming down nearly to mid-chest. He would look every bit the homeless bum in his overly large clothes were it not for his eyes. The whites of his eyes were black, as if in perpetual darkness. His pupils, though, they shone a brilliant, mesmerizing blue, hiding such power within them that it could steal a villain's breath away. They were the only giveaway that this man was truly the greatest hero in the world. All Might. But that didn't matter to would-be hero Izuku Midoriya. Not when his hero, his idol, had just told him he didn't believe he could be a hero. His glassy, now fake smile hung on his lips as he broke out into a heavy flop sweat. His pupils were trembling in their sockets, mere pinpricks now really. The young, dark green-haired young boy had practically just had the rug pulled out from under his feet. All Might let out a sigh, seeing how his words were sending his young fan's world crashing all around him. Truly, this brought him no pleasure, no joy. Perhaps if the boy had any visible training, he could have said differently. But the boy clearly had not but a dream in his head and had never actually worked to accomplish it. At least not physically, or in terms of personality. The boy hadn't even been able to look him in the eye when he asked if a quirkless person could become a hero. Instead, he trembled and closed them. Izuku probably knew what he would say long before All Might said it. The man sighed again. Officers may be mocked, but they are still a vital force. My best friend is a police officer. He didn't know why he added that last bit, but something about the kid looking so despondent forced the words out of him. Anything to put even the tiniest bit of cheer back into his young fan. But the boy didn't react. All Might closed his eyes for a moment. Before he started walking away, I'm sorry, Midoriya Shonen. It's great to dream, but you also need to be realistic. He closed the door behind him and started walking downstairs, leaving the young boy who had so carelessly hitched a ride on his leg alone on the roof. Sorry to just leave you like that, kid, but I need to get this guy. He patted his pockets where he had left the slime villain he had captured inside a bottle, only to freeze. He looked down and felt his blood chill as he realized the bottles were gone. Izuku didn't cry. Perhaps he was beyond tears at the moment. For the barest moment, he looked at the edge of the roof in temptation, the words of his once friend Katsuki Bakugo filling his mind. For a moment, he wondered if a quick step off the side wouldn't be for the best. No one cared about him but his mom. He had no friends, no ambitions, nothing but the dream his idol had just destroyed. The moment passed, and he made his way down to the streets, still utterly despondent. He was stuck in his own head. It's time to start thinking seriously about your future. The words rung hollow in his head. Even the best of the best said it. A tear finally fell as he hugged his precious hero notebook volume 13 to his chest. Don't cry. You already knew. You always knew. Another fell. But I tried so hard. He began to grit his teeth, trying to keep more from falling. So hard to ignore reality. An explosion rang out, startling him so badly he almost dropped his notebook. He stopped stock still. Even now, my feet just brought me here. Even when I already know. He closed his eyes. I shouldn't go. I'll just make a fool of myself. His feet moved, and his eyes widened as he got closer. Dozens of onlookers were there, watching the events. Gawking. Izuku forced his way in and let out a gasp. Oh no. It was the slime villain. The same slime villain that All Might had saved him from. The same slime villain that All Might must have dropped when Izuku grabbed his leg. Shame and self-recrimination filled the young teen. It's all my fault. All Might. He can't do anything right now. His time limit. He screamed in his own mind. Off to the other side, All Might himself was clutching his incredibly wounded side, screaming the same thing in his own mind. I was too distracted by my time limit. His teeth were grinding as he could do nothing but watch. Even after I admonished that young fan pathetic. I'm pathetic. One of the civilians asked, why aren't the heroes doing anything? It caught both of their attentions, for different reasons. The villain caught a kid. Another responded, some junior high student. It's been like this for some time. No way. Izuku clapped a hand over his mouth. I felt like I would die in seconds. How can they? Another civilian asked. Wasn't that the guy All Might was chasing earlier? Did he get away from even him? A din rose as the bystanders started talking, wondering why their number one hero wasn't doing anything. Izuku and All Might were both full of nothing but self-recrimination, one calling himself pathetic and the other begging for a hero to come to fix his terrible, foolish mistake before someone died. And then Izuku saw who the student was. His notebook clattered to the floor, and he was rushing straight towards Kaken's terrified face before his mind even knew what his legs were doing. No kid, a pro hero yelled as he saw the little brat rushing in. Page 25. But Izuku moved faster than he had ever moved before in his life, ripping his backpack off his shoulders and slinging it towards the monster's eyes, the edge hitting it in the one spot that was a target. The sludge recoiled slightly and temporarily freed Katsuki's mouth to allow him some air. Izuku grabbed onto it and tried futilely to rip the sludge off his former friend. But the monster recovered swiftly and a slimy tentacle smacked him away from it. He hit the ground and rolled over some flames, groaning in pain. The heroes panicked and made to rush forward, not willing to let another student get caught. All Might himself was trying to force himself back into his hero form to save the kid. But Izuku found strength he didn't know he had and somehow got on all fours. Give. His green eyes started to shimmer weakly. Give Kaken back. He roared. Later, long after it was all over, Izuku would swear up and down that he heard something similar to a violin string snapping inside his head. Nothing of the sort happened, but Izuku would attribute this as the moment it happened. His whole body started glowing a brilliant emerald, and his eyes began to shine the same way All Might's eyes did. He reached a hand out to the incredulous-looking Katsuki, and the green glow enveloped him. And then Izuku yanked, and Katsuki was ripped away from the villain as if his captor wasn't even there. Katsuki rolled on the floor and coughed as he came to a stop near the boy, Deku. He rasped out as he lifted himself up. What the fuck? He growled out, what the fuck is this? He yelled as Izuku stared at the fading glow on his hand as if it were the Holy Grail itself. You fucking little brat. The slime roared and made to attack them. Izuku, who had been desperately trying to hold on to the fading feeling inside of him, startled and started glowing again. He jabbed his palm forward, and a visible blast of pure force rocketed out. It appeared to be compacting even the air in front of it as it sped towards the villain. When it impacted, the monster blew apart into medium-sized chunks. As a bystander, All Might had been completely and utterly moved by the little quirkless kid acting more like a hero than all of the heroes there put together. It was what had inspired him once more, what had unburied the spark of life left in him, after all of the bitterness of the past 5 years had ruthlessly tried to crush it as his body wasted away. Did he lie? He had frozen mid-transformation. He eyed the situation closely as it unfolded. No. He looks completely and utterly flabbergasted. He's even more shocked than I am. He started to grin and almost relaxed as he watched the boy blow the slime villain apart, and that proved to be a nearly fatal error. I'll kill you. The villain roared to the heavens as it forced itself back together. Izuku's untrained blast had been unfocused and had lost power as it traveled. It hadn't had enough force when it impacted to blow the villain into small enough pieces to knock him out the way All Might had done earlier. Shit. All Might coughed up a bit of blood and started forcing himself to transform as the villain formed a spear-tip-like tentacle and drove it straight towards Izuku before anyone could react. Well, almost anyone. Katsuki forced his rage and shock down and kicked Izuku out of the way. The spear tentacle pierced his left shoulder rather than his chest. It still forced the boy back and into the ground with an agonized cry. The slime stayed in his body even as it separated from the main tentacle, and All Might saw red. He forced himself into hero form, and his fingers dug right into the steel lamppost and nearly ripped right through it. Another cry from Izuku distracted him for a very short moment. He almost stopped what he was doing as he saw a brilliant blue flame erupt in the boy's injury, but refused to allow himself yet another mistake. He rushed forward and intercepted the villain, whose eyes widened in terror. All Might, The greatest hero who always wore a smile as he saved people. He was snarling in rage. Detroit. Smash. The villain was ended with a single swing of his fist. MT Lady was forced to use her arms and body to shield the pedestrians as even the very air moved out of the way from All Might's punch. A whirlwind erupted around them, extinguishing the fires even the water hero backdraft hadn't been able to put out. And then it was over, and All Might wasted no time getting to Izuku's side. "Are you all right, mid-young one?" He cut himself off at the last minute. Better not let out that they knew each other. What the hell is that blue fire? How the hell did he awaken not one, but two quirks? Just as he was about to speak again, the fire vanished and left behind unmarred skin. Regeneration? He watched Izuku pat his former wound in wonder as everyone who had been watching erupted in cheers. "Even though I admonished you." A small bit of blood flew from his lips, which he quickly wiped away to keep anyone from seeing except for Izuku. "I wasn't putting what I said into practice. I'm truly pathetic." "All Might," Izuku whispered. "Kid, what the hell were you thinking?" Death arms stomped over. "Just what were you thinking, you reckless little kid? You could have gotten yourself killed even with that amazing quirk." No one saw Katsuki's fists clench. Izuku didn't know what possessed him, but he spoke again. But, I don't have a quirk." Ah, denial. He's probably in shock. The analytical portion of All Might's mind brought up the explanation. "Pull the other one." Kamui Woods threw in his 2 cents. Izuku laughed a little hysterically. I've never had a quirk." "And you still threw yourself into that?" MT Lady walked over and began to add to the admonishment as she heard this. She could tell the kid wasn't lying and also recognized the astonishment the boy was feeling, and that just frustrated her beyond belief. To think a little formerly quirkless kid was a bigger hero than her. "You could have gotten yourself killed. You're lucky your quirk suddenly manifested. What the hell was going through your fool head? I've never seen such recklessness in." Years of resentment and mistreatment had built up to this moment, and the idea that he had a quirk was starting to put a high in him that no drug could have. "None of you were doing a damn thing." He spat out uncharacteristically, rage tinting his tone. The heroes recoiled. Even now that he had a quirk, even now they thought him useless. "The only one of you that did your job was backdraft. Wait for a suitable quirk. What kind of heroes are you?" The pro heroes started to get angry, and All Might started to get worried. This was a lot of resentment he hadn't sensed earlier. Perhaps he'd been a fool not to. Even if things were better now, he well remembered bygone days before he became who he was today. Back when he had been just Toshinori Yagi. Back when he had been just like this boy. "You want to know why I ran in?" Izuku trembled. "I don't know why." Everything stopped. My legs moved before my mind even realized what was going on. Everyone's breath was stolen from them. All Might began to grin even wider. Even with the resentment in him, this boy had the greatest potential for heroism he'd seen in decades. But before he could say another word, the day seemed to catch up to the young boy. Izuku passed out, and it was only All Might's reflexes that kept him from smashing the back of his head on the ground. This kid. It was a good thing All Might always smiled, because he could pass off his shite-eating grin. Even the heroes who had been so angry at his recklessness couldn't help but smile in admiration. "Sorry, but no interviews today. I'll be bringing him home," All Might declared, and started to walk away with Izuku in his arms. He stopped and then turned somewhat sheepishly. Does anyone know where he lives?" Practically everyone face-faulted. Katsuki glared at the boy in All Might's arms in fury, but there was nothing he could do right now. But Deku would get what was coming to him soon. Mizutofu. He spat out as he gathered his things and stalked away. Big building next to 2 others. "There's a number 2 on it." "Thank you, young one." All Might stared after the light blonde for a moment, seeing the resentment in him, though he didn't know why. Katsuki snarled at someone coming to talk to him and just walked away and into the streets. All Might turned and started jogging away, stopping for a brief moment when he saw Izuku's discarded notebook on the floor. He picked it up and then leapt away in one bound. Inko Midoriya was fretting as she wondered where her son was. The dark green-haired, slightly dumpy woman was pacing back and forth, trying to avoid hyperventilating. Her son was almost never this late, and every single time he'd come home with one bruise or another. It was enough to drive even a mother with a stronger constitution spare. But Izuku was truly her son, and she was fighting panic. A strong knock on the door almost had her jumping out of her skin. She raced to the door and had to fight to stay conscious as All Might himself was revealed with her Izuku passed out in his arms. "Izuku!" She screamed shrilly, "Izuku, honey! I assume you are Izuku Shonen's mother?" Inko nodded rapidly to All Might's question. "May I come in? Your son has had quite a day?" He chuckled to himself as the woman practically tried to haul him inside. He quirked an eyebrow at the All Might door sign with Izuku written on it, but that was nothing compared to when he stepped into the room. GRK. He choked. His form was literally everywhere in the room. Everything from action figures to the floor rug were All Might. "This is a bit much," he chuckled as he laid the boy on his mattress. He stepped out of the room and had to fight to keep from wobbling. He had long since passed his limit. He was starting to let off little wisps of steam. Inko's eyes widened when she saw what was happening. All Might. The man in his hero form was a giant, absolutely covered in muscles, and his two long bangs stood straight like horns. Generally, he wasn't known for steaming though. Crap. He sighed as the steam practically exploded from his form. Inko's eyes widened and she backed away in apprehension. "That's too Midoriya about to see my true self today." Her eyes widened to epic proportions as the hero's voice changed, and almost fainted away entirely as his true form was revealed. "Well, what?" she stammered, eyeing the man so like her son's hero, and yet nothing like him at all. She started to hyperventilate. The man reached out to steady her. "Calm yourself, Midoriya-san." Deep breaths. Even now, he couldn't help but help people. He helped her into a chair and had to excuse himself as he poured her a glass of water. He chuckled when she finally calmed down. "I can't tell if Izuku Shonen gets his skittishness from you or if you get it from him." He tried to joke. She laughed a little strangely. "Sorry. You shocked you?" Tashinori sighed. "It's an unfortunate fact of life. I'm getting old, and I suffered an injury years ago. What you see now? I'm a shell of my former self, and am down to 3 hours a day in my hero form," he admitted sadly. I see." Inko knew what this meant. At some point, sometime soon, the symbol of peace would retire. Izuku would be devastated. Does Izuku know? She wasn't sure why he would, but there had to be a reason for All Might to bring him home personally, right? "He does," Tashinori confirmed. "I saved him from a villain today, and my time limit ran out." He was quite shocked. He chuckled dryly as the woman managed a deadpan stare. He turned and looked over towards the room. "You have quite the son, Midoriya-san. He impressed me quite a bit today." She looked down. Ever since he could understand what he saw, you were his hero. Since he realized heroes existed, he wanted nothing more than to be one. To follow in your footsteps. Meeting you must have been a dream come true for him. Tashinori's grin widened. "How did he impress you?" She fidgeted as she blurted out the question. "I love him more than anything, but... He's quirkless?" Tashinori asked dryly. She nodded helplessly. "And yet, he was more of a hero today than some professionals." She gasped at his words. "Midoriya-san." "Inko." She interrupted, and then blushed at doing so. "Inko then." Tashinori smiled again. "I won't mince words, Inko. Your son did quite a reckless thing today. A villain escaped from me because I was too concerned with my time limit. He captured a young student with an explosion quirk." "Katsuki." Inko clapped her hands to her mouth. "Yes, that does sound similar to what Izuku Shonen called him." Tashinori mused for a moment. "Right. Katsuki-san was captured, and the villain, being made of slime, proved quite difficult to capture as none of the pro heroes could do any damage to him. All the while, I could only stand on the sidelines and watch, feeling helpless." His grin split his face. "Your quirkless son rushed out where all the heroes were standing still and managed to buy young Katsuki some much-needed air." Inko looked faint. Like every true hero, his legs moved before his brain caught up. "Izuku." Inko was about to cry, hearing her son's idol speak so well of him. "His actions inspired me to move, and I forced myself through the pain and back into my hero form." He leaned back in his chair, only before I could do anything. His grin was blinding. "Your son awoke his quirk." Inko could handle no more. She fainted dead away. His grin became a little strained. "I hope this isn't going to become a thing." Izuku jerked awake suddenly, springing up in his bed and gasping. He was trembling and sweating heavily, almost feverishly. His dream. It had felt so real. So real. Slowly, his breath calmed, and he flopped back down, grimacing slightly when he realized they'd probably need to do laundry now. He clenched his fists. For a moment, for one fleeting moment, he'd been normal. He'd been just like everybody else. He'd even met his idol on top of it. And now he was back in the waking world. Still quirkless, still worthless. Still Deku. He eyed his All Might posters and figurines before turning his head towards his desk. He knew what lay on it. An innocent little paper that would determine his whole life ahead of him. His school ranking list. And only one name was on it despite the many available slots. Yue Hai. The dream had been much too real. Even now, Dream All Might's words rang in his head. You need to be realistic. He ground his teeth and got up with a groan, marching over to the table. He grabbed a pen and hovered it over the page, ready to cross out his dream school. But he couldn't do it. Even with All Might's admonishment, he just couldn't do it. With another groan, he slammed the pen down and left his fanboy sweat dream room. Even if it had felt so real, even if he was still quirkless little Deku, he still wanted nothing more than to be a hero. Just like All Might. He gasped in shock as he entered his dining room and saw the man sitting at his table. Yo, Toshinori waved with a grin, decided to finally rejoin the living Midoriya Shonen. Izuku trembled. All Might was sitting in his dining room. All Might was in his gaunt, skinny, powerless form in his dining room. The gaunt, skinny, powerless form he'd created in his dream that couldn't possibly be real. All Might. Then, my name is Toshinori Yagi, Midoriya Shonen. And no, it wasn't a dream. His gaunt grin widened to amazing proportions. Izuku. His mom practically knocked him over in a flying hug tackle. Oh, honey, I'm so proud of you. What was your quirk? What was it? She had such a happy, energetic grin on her face, even as some tears streamed from her eyes. Izuku hadn't seen his mother look this excited, this blindingly happy, for anything in almost 10 years. Ever since she had been able to do nothing but cry on his shoulder when he'd been declared quirkless. His eyes started to water. It was real? His lips started to quiver. But how? I was diagnosed. I have an extra joint on my toe. I'm quirkless. So do I. The words froze the two of them. Our circumstances are different, Shonen, but the results are the same. Wasn't that an understatement of things? But even if his true form was revealed to Inko, he wasn't planning on spilling his other secret to her so soon. I don't know why your quirk lay dormant for so long, but it appeared. As for the toe, not a clue. I'm not a doctor. Toshinori could definitely see the resemblance, as the mother and son tightly embraced one another and opened up the waterworks. His giant grin turned into a tender smile as he witnessed the moment. Indeed, it was very real, young man. You developed quite a splendid quirk during that battle. His grin dropped as the two remembered he was there. In fact, if it weren't for the look of shock, joy, and wonder on your face as it happened, I would have assumed you had been lying to me about being quirkless. I would never. Izuku jumped and waved his arms, as if trying to ward off the not accusation. Toshinori let out a chuckle. Relax. You could never have faked that look on your face. I had much the same look on mine the first time I used my quirk. Izuku. Inko whined. What was your quirk? Toshinori wouldn't tell me. I'm not sure. Izuku admitted sheepishly. To be honest, I'm not either. The only thing I can say for certain is that it is likely an emitter type. Toshinori told them. You displayed 3 abilities, though really 2 of them may just be connected. He raised his hand, one finger pointing. You enveloped Katsuki Bakugo with a green aura like the one over your own body and easily pulled him out of the slime. Ah, Inko let out a happy squeak. That's like a better version of my quirk. I can do the same, but I need multiple motions and can only use it on smaller objects. She looked utterly ecstatic. Toshinori let another grin out and continued with a second finger raised. 2. You were able to project a force blast, similar to one of my punches. Weaker, much weaker, but similar. You even changed the weather. Izuku still sounded completely awed at that fact. Toshinori grinned. And 3. He suppressed a wince as he glanced momentarily at Inko. When you were injured, your wound was enveloped in a blue flame and completely healed. Injured? Inko shrieked, and started needling her son overprotectively. Where were you hurt, Izuku? Does it hurt? How many fingers am I holding up? All Might deadpanned at that last question. The resemblance between these two was almost hilarious. Almost. Mom, I'm fine. I'm fine. Look. He pulled his shirt down slightly, see? There aren't even any marks. I feel fine. Inko let out a breath. Please be more careful, baby. I couldn't bear. She started to sniffle. Izuku pulled her into a hug. No, 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 please don't cry, Mom. I'm okay. A whistle went off. Ah, the tea. Inko hurried back into the kitchen and came back with a kettle and some cups. She poured them all some. I hope you enjoy, Toshinori-san. This looks like one of my favorites. Excellent taste, Inka-san. Toshinori grinned as he took a sniff. Now, he brought the serious air back. I have an idea I would like to test. He looked around for something small and placed a simple salt shaker on the table in front of Izuku. Lift this. With my quirk, Izuku started to stammer, but this is too sudden. How do I even do that? I never had a quirk before. Mumble, 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 mumble. He's doing it again. Inko declared sheepishly as one of Toshinori's eyebrows twitched. Sorry about that. He can get really intense when he's in this mode. Doesn't really pay attention to his surroundings. She sighed sadly. When he was diagnosed, his brain was the only thing he could really work out. He dedicated himself quite heavily to learning everything he could about other people's quirks as well as their habits. Mumble, 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 mumble. I saw a little bit of his notebook. It was quite impressive, actually. He even came up with several scenarios to beat a couple villains that I could see working out. He certainly has a brain on him. Toshinori praised the young lad, who was still in his own world. He grinned a little wider and turned into All Might, Midoriya Shonen. He boomed, making Inko squeak and Izuku to spaz out a little. You must feel it. You can't brute force your quirk into submission. He cut out the transformation with a puff of smoke. Feel it out inside you, Shonen. Remember what you felt during the incident. Remember what would have happened to your friend had you not intervened. Pull that feeling out and embrace your future. Prove you deserve a place at UA. With his hero and his mother cheering him on, how could he do anything but? His eyes and body began glowing green, which mirrored on the salt shaker. And then it shot up like a rocket, straight through the roof, the floor above them, that roof, and into the stratosphere. They all looked up at the hole in the ceiling, one deadpanned, one shaking, and one sweating bullets. That's going to be expensive. Inko whimpered. Izuku started sweating actual bullets. All Might looked down, staring at the boy with his face expressionless. Shonen. I said pick it up, not send it into low orbit. Despite his face, he was struggling to contain both his glee and his amusement. My apologies, Inka-san. I'll pay for that. He just barely held back a chuckle as Izuku started stammering out apologies and repeatedly bowing to him. Izuku let out a heavy yawn as he made his way into the dump that was the Dagoba Municipal Park beach. Oceanic dumping, oceanic currents, and utter assholes had turned what was once a beautiful beach into a literal junkyard. Everything from refrigerators to cars and trucks littered the sand. Excellent. You made it on time, Shonen. It was 6 a.m. The sun was barely rising. It was a little chilly due to the ocean breeze. And Izuku was pretty exhausted meeting All Might, especially since he had no idea what this was about. Hello, All Might. He sat on a car that was undercarriage to sand, the wheels missing. Why did you have me meet you here? He eyed the man standing tall on a fridge. 2 reasons. The great hero stuck out 2 fingers. First, your quirk needs training. We still have to experiment and see what you can do. Cleaning this dilapidated beach will serve well and aid you in your quest to reach UA. Many pro heroes and hero hopefuls have forgotten that to be a hero means accepting unglamorous jobs too. There are too many people in it for only fame and glory. He hopped down, and with a single movement of his arm, he pressed the refrigerator down into a tin can, revealing the rising sun behind him. Your first step in your heroic career will be the restoration of this beach. Izuku was immediately wide awake and focused on his idol. Secondly, he felt it was a bit more personal to be in his true form. So he reverted. Shonen, you impressed me far more than I let on yesterday. To see a kid with no quirk racing to certain doom to save someone from their doom. He sat in the sand with a sigh. It made me feel like an utter hypocrite. Even after I scolded you and told you to pursue a more realistic dream. You were far more heroic than even me. Meddling where you're not needed, not able, or maybe even not wanted, is the essence of heroism. You bought that child enough time to breathe and gave me the kick in the pants I've needed for the past 5 years. A hero must always be ready to risk their life to save others. You can not only be a hero, you may one day even surpass me. All Might. Izuku was all teary-eyed and nearly sobbing in joy. That is why I wish to make you my successor. Izuku stopped breathing. Shonen no? Izuku, will you accept my power and become the next symbol of peace? Of course, given a mission by All Might himself, how could Izuku say anything but yes? And then the first part of the question penetrated. He blinked. Take your power? What do you mean? Toshinori stared at him calmly, and despite his currently weak body, he stood proudly. Exactly as I said. I believe you're worthy of inheriting my power. Huh? Izuku looked completely bewildered. What's with that face? Toshinori yelled, spitting a little blood. This concerns my quirk. You may have noticed, but every time someone asks me what my quirk is, I always play it off or deflect by telling a joke. The tabloids heavily suspect it's super strength or a boosting quirk. But it's neither of those things. Izuku's eyes were widening as Toshinori spoke. My quirk is one for all. He held his hand out, and a rainbow of colors seemed to envelop his palm. Izuku gasped. I always deflect the question because All Might must be a natural-born hero. But one for all is a sacred torch. My master passed it on to me. I was quirkless, just like you, Shonen. Izuku simply could not breathe. All Might. Quirkless. That was impossible. One for all is the ability to store and transfer power. The first person built it up and then passed it on, giving the second one greatly enhanced abilities and strength. They then cultivated it, grew it, and passed it on again. Each time, it grows to make the next wielder stronger than the last. And you, Shonen, you are next. He clenched his fist. What say you? Izuku stopped. Is that even fair? Toshinori started in surprise, having expected his fanboy to immediately agree. All right. If I had still been quirkless, I would have agreed immediately, of course. But now? He stopped speaking for a moment. Would that be fair to the others? And how am I supposed to learn my own quirk? It's completely different from one for all. Toshinori grinned. You're not exactly dissuading me, kid. That kind of selfless attitude, you're a perfect successor. He held out a hand and pointed at the boy. Worry not, Shonen. Your own quirk awakening makes things easier on us. You see, even if you're a perfect successor in terms of your sense of justice, your limp noodle body leaves much to be desired. One for all would rip you apart at the seams if you accepted it now. Izuku had a slightly terrified look on his face. You would have had to perform hardcore physical training over the next 10 months to even have a chance of accepting it in time to enroll at UA. With your quirk awakening, we're not in as much of a hurry on that front. We can dedicate the first few months more towards your own quirk and then start in on the physical training. He rubbed his head sheepishly. Truth be told, this is a bit of a relief. You would have had little to no time with one for all prior to the entrance exam. You probably would have broken your arms or legs trying to use it because we would have been in too much of a hurry turning you into the proper vessel. We can get you there properly now, rather than rushing like madmen. He grinned again and turned back into All Might. So, what do you say, kid? I'll do it. Izuku affirmed. All Might. I'll be your successor. Excellent. All Might's perpetual grin got even wider. Let's begin first by determining just what the hell your quirk actually is. Because one of your abilities has nothing to do with the other. The fire, right? Izuku asked. I haven't really been able to use it since. I tried just a little at home. Dangerous, Shonen. All Might admonished him. Try to save training with that side of your quirk for outdoors. Izuku nodded, looking sheepish. Now, can you describe your parents' quirks for me again? Well, Mom already mentioned it to you, but she can pull things about as big as her purse to her. It takes multiple motions, though. Izuku reminded him, my dad. He looked a little down. I've never seen it. He started to mumble, his volume decreasing. Or him really. Not that I can remember. He shook himself, though All Might made a note of it. It was definitely something he would work with the boy on. Truth be told, it even gave him a sense of kinship. His parents, he never really knew them either, but he can breathe fire from what Mom told me. All Might started to muse. Well, It makes sense for the quirks you displayed, or maybe just a singular quirk as a combination. Near as I can tell, yours is a mutated version of your parents' quirks. Usually quirks will either be inherited singularly or combined. Rarely, a child will be born with a quirk completely unrelated to their parents. Yours seems to be a bit of a combination of those two concepts. He let out a bit of a sigh. Despite my intelligence, this isn't really my area of expertise. He suddenly had a light bulb pop up over his head, and his grin widened. With that in mind, let's start figuring out just what you're capable of, shonen, and worry about specifics later. You can manipulate objects in any direction and project force blasts. That seems to be some pretty strong telekinesis, or an overpowered version of your mother's quirk. Let's start from there. We know you can lift small items, and we know you can lift at least an average junior high student. So let's see what your limits are. He pointed off to the side. Do you see that, shonen? Izuku turned around and looked over in the direction his teacher was pointing. He scanned the piles until he realized exactly what he was staring at. I asked that, an 18-wheeler CB. How did that get there? Indeed, the old big rig was practically buried about cabin deep in the junk, with its wheels sticking out at about a 30-degree angle. All Might's boisterous laugh sounded from behind him. Yes, this beach is truly a shadow of its former self. Had we been strength training for One for All, that would have either been your graduation test, or I would have been forced to move it myself. He clapped a hand on Izuku's shoulder. With your telekinesis, though, maybe it'll be a cinch. Go for it. You can do it. Izuku took a couple deep breaths before clapping his face. All Might believed in him, so he couldn't fail here. He closed his eyes and dug deep for his power. When he opened them again, his irises were blazing emeralds. The green glow enveloped the rusting behemoth, and Izuku tried to lift straight up. There was a groaning noise as some junk shifted and slid off the pile. The sound of straining metal filled the air. Izuku had already started sweating, and his form was trembling. With a grimace, he threw his arm out as the green glow around him intensified. His arm was quivering like a leaf in a hurricane, and he was letting out pained grunts. The big rig truck slowly lifted up, but Izuku seemed to lose the ability to breathe. Every muscle in his body was trembling, and his face had turned bright red. With a gasp, Izuku let go, collapsing to the sand. The truck groaned and flexed dangerously as it settled back into its heap. He'd been able to lift it about 2 feet, which wasn't enough to separate it from the rest of the trash. It was honestly more than All Might had expected, but he'd certainly been unable to hold it in midair or move it at all. And even with just that, Izuku was panting like he'd been in a triathlon, with cinder blocks attached to his feet. What an amazing quirk! All Might stared in surprise. I truly hadn't believed he'd be able to even budge it. He's had his quirk for a day. Just what kind of potential does it have? He slowly grinned, even wider than his symbol of peace grin. That was quite a show, shonen. I couldn't do it. Izuku moaned and clutched at his head, and I have a headache now. He looked down. Sorry for disappointing you, All Might. He mumbled sadly. Disappointed? All Might's head snapped to him in shock. Just what has this poor boy gone through to give him self-esteem issues this bad? He ground his teeth. Shonen, I'm as far from disappointed as I could possibly be. I intended for that to be an impossible task, a goal for you to work towards if your quirk was the type to grow in strength. There are some with harder limits that can't be overcome. That was supposed to be your motivation, and instead you blew me out of the water. He smiled at the stunned boy and ruffled his hair. I now have to wonder, were you unable to lift it fully because you believed that it was too heavy, or were you unable to lift it because your quirk is still in its untrained, fledgling state? He let out a rueful chuckle. Either answer to that question is a little scary. He gave the boy a kind look. Quite frankly, if it weren't for the fact that I already know you don't have a villainous bone in your body, I would be terrified of your potential. Izuku was mute, blushing madly at the praise. His breathing had returned to normal, though his heart was still hammering. His head was still a bit achy too. All Might allowed himself to revert. Truly, it was a sight to see. Now let's keep at it. Clearly a couple tons of 18-wheeler is too much right now. Let's try some lighter things and try to see if you can do multiple objects at a time. Yes, sir. Izuku yelled in determination. Roughly 2 months had passed since that fateful day. Izuku still hadn't managed to lift the truck cab with the same ease that he could lift something smaller, but he could now hold it above the rest of the trash for a couple seconds before the mental strain got to him. Toshinori had forbidden him from moving it off the beach unless he could do it in one motion. In fact, he'd been told that if it touched any part of the beach, another trash heap, or fell, he would personally move it right back. Izuku hadn't made much progress actually cleaning the beach yet. Mostly he'd been able to move smaller items like chairs and tires with his powers easily. Items like fridges still tired him out after about an hour at best. In addition, All Might had finally started his strength training. He alternated, training physically one day and with his quirk the next. They still had no success with any fire, making them almost think the incident had been a fluke. Izuku walked out of his house at about 5 a.m. to get to the beach for his training, only to jerk to a stop as he realized Toshinori was already outside and waiting for him. In a car. A very fancy car. Hop in, shonen. He grinned. Today we're taking a trip. It took a while to set up around this time of the year, so I had to wait a bit longer than I wished. Where are we going? Izuku asked as he buckled in, and for some reason I didn't think All Might would like fancy cars, he mumbled out loud. Baha. Toshinori laughed. Even if saving people is its own reward, the money does help occasionally. I normally don't drive at all, but as my health declined I've ended up doing it more often. He grinned wickedly. As for where we're going, secret. You can nap if you like. Were the final exams for the semester stressful? Yes. Izuku hissed out, recalling how the semester had ended. He stayed silent for a moment. All Might, was I right to just ignore the other kids? To confront Kaken? He asked timidly, as his mind drifted to the next time he had school after the incident, as well as the days following it. Izuku couldn't help but shiver slightly, though he couldn't fathom why. The day had proceeded, fairly routinely actually. He hadn't said a word about his new quirk, and clearly the news hadn't caught his face or action since no one had brought it up. As far as anyone knew, he was still just worthless little Deku. Even Kaken hadn't said anything. Actually, he hadn't so much as acknowledged Izuku's existence. Hadn't even glanced in his direction at all since the incident. Maybe that was what was giving him this bad feeling. That was far too unlike Kaken. He was much more typical of his quirk. Explosive, loud, confrontational. He hadn't even raised his hand to answer a question today. When called, by either one of his hang-ins or the teacher, he had been even nastier than usual. No mean feat when his default seemed to be set to absolute cockiness. The bell rang and Izuku hurried from the classroom, eager to get back to Dagoba and continue his cleaning and training. All Might would be joining him later in the day, of course, though if that was as All Might or Toshinori seemed to be a bit of a wash. The man just couldn't help himself, often using up his time in hero mode on petty crimes. Izuku couldn't exactly fault him for it though. That was why he was All Might, the #1 hero. Only his plan hit a little snag. Or maybe the snag hit him. DKU. He cringed as Katsuki's voice rang up behind him. He eyed his peers, some grinning maliciously, eager to see him get another beat down. Others just regarded him with pity in their eyes and turned away. He didn't even have time to say a word, as when he turned around Kaken had already grabbed him by the lapels and slammed him into a locker. He let out a surprised grunt, though he wasn't yet in pain. You little bastard. Kaken hissed, a dark look in his eyes. What the fuck was that last Friday, Deku? KKKKK Kaken. Izuku stammered, sweating profusely. 3 don't know. Cut the shit, bastard. He roared in his face, spraying him with spit. At this point, the rest of the onlookers had realized this wasn't just standard Katsuki. No, something had happened. Something which utterly infuriated the ash blonde. Has it been fun, huh, you little shit? Making a fucking fool out of me. Kaken, what are you talking about? Izuku yelled back, utterly confused. Just what was the boy getting at? You know damn well. Katsuki howled. Quirks don't develop past for you, bastard. You've been hiding it for years, haven't you? Everyone in the hall gasped or started murmuring. Has it been fun, you fucker? Has it been fun making me the butt of your joke for years? JJJ, the verdette, seemed stuck on that one letter. First confusion, then astonishment, and finally actual anger playing on his face. Just what kind of troll logic are you operating on, Kaken? He yelled back at his former friend. He shoved the boy back and Katsuki stumbled, a look of utter shock on his face at Izuku growing a spine. The murmurs around increased in volume. I thought you'd be happy for me, but you're just like always. Izuku's notorious crybaby nature was threatening to rear its ugly head. You think I liked getting bullied by you? All Might's ideals, his belief in his student, and all of the past torment was coming to a head by all of you. Having my dreams stomped on and crushed, that I was just pretending and having a good laugh out of sight behind your back. Anger was starting to literally waft off the boy. The rest of the students gasped as his hair started to wave and his signature green glow was starting to show. DKU, Katsuki bellowed, rearing an arm back as explosions ignited it. How else do you explain it, huh? Quirks don't just magically appear, you bastard. Izuku froze as he heard Katsuki's voice, even though his next words weren't spoken at all. You were a pebble. Just a pebble in my path. A nobody. I'm the fucking greatest. I'm better than everyone else. Pebble. Izuku thought to himself, ignoring his quirk, showing another facet to it for the moment. Is that really all you saw me as? His sadness grew as he came to terms with the fact that his former friend really had changed completely for the worse. Nothing remained about the cheerful, if somewhat mean boy Izuku had befriended so long ago. And apparently all the praise heaped on him since early childhood had made him develop a full-blown superiority complex on top of all his other issues. You need a wake-up call, Kakin, and I'm not afraid of you anymore. I'll save you, even if it's you I need to save you from. He manned up and yelled back. Well, mine did. He took a step forward, and I'm going to use it to get into UA same as you. I'm going to become the greatest hero in the world. Deku, stop looking down on me. Katsuki had no inside voice whatsoever. I'm not looking down on anyone. Izuku yelled back. I'm not the one who thinks he's the main character. DKU. Kakin. Katsuki charged forward, his arm igniting and many explosions building up in a crescendo. Izuku's green glow engulfed him, his eyes turning into pools of shimmering emerald and his hair whipping about. Katsuki was picked up and thrown back into the lockers. He hit the metal and crushed it, a shockwave crumpling other lockers beside his impact zone. Even the tiles on the floor were cracked and broken. Katsuki also lost control of his quirk for a moment in his astonishment, and a massive explosion turned yet more lockers and even the wall behind him into rubble. What's going on here? Their homeroom teacher was hurrying forward and pushing the other astonished kids aside. He skid to a halt and gaped at Izuku, who dropped his quirk and reverted to stammering old Izuku, sweating up a storm. The teacher gaped at him in shock. Was that a quirk? At your age? Air. Izuku poked his fingers together, maybe? He squeaked, the adrenaline leaving him cold. That's amazing. The teacher gasped, before shaking himself and resuming his forced air of authority as he saw the damage. Bakugo. Midoriya. Principal's office. Now. Izuku hurried after the man as Katsuki stood, somewhat scuffed up but not really harmed. He was a very durable young man. Even that hadn't really hurt him, though any other teen there would have had a couple broken bones at least. His face was expressionless as he followed them, though if anyone else had been asked they would have claimed his face looked thunderous. Deku hadn't just stood up to him, hadn't finally grown a pair and fought back. He'd drawn first blood. The days following that, well, when they both returned from their week-long suspension at any rate, had been confusing, strange, irritating. Kakin hadn't said a word since then. Quite the opposite, the boy had been ignoring him entirely except for nasty glares. The other kids, though, they hadn't exactly been sweet and innocent either. The ones who had bullied him their entire lives had immediately started trying to cozy up to him, acting like they were friends, praising his quirk, never him, acting like all the bullying had never happened. Those who had just stood aside and let him get bullied were no better. Really, hadn't he always wanted friends of his own? Hadn't he dreamed of a day where he would have a quirk and would finally be accepted? And yet when he finally had it, he first got claustrophobic and then he got angry. How fake could they all possibly be? Not one of them had ever even apologized for all the snide remarks and insults. If he were Kakin, he would most definitely have told them all to fuck right off and told them exactly where they could shove their friendship. But he wasn't Kakin. He was Izuku, and he'd not accepted a single invite to hang out. Hadn't joined any groups. He kept them at arm's length at best, shrugged off any friendly gestures, spoke politely at some points, stuttered like normal at others. Nothing had really changed, and this time it was because of him. And of course, his rejection had offended the little bastards, and it was right back to sneers and loneliness. Years of mistreatment doesn't just go away, shonen. Tashinori thought to himself as they drove. Can I say you were right? No, I can't. No one can say that except for you, Izuku. What I can say is what those kids did to you wasn't right. And personally, I'm glad you didn't buy into their friendship. People can be incredibly fake, and the fact that not one of them apologized to you exemplifies that. He put a hand on Izuku's head and ruffled his hair. UA will be a new beginning for you, shonen. I'm sure you'll make plenty of friends once you make it in. Ones who like you for you and aren't just trying to be seen next to the next big quirk. You don't need any of those kids by your side. Izuku smiled, and his eyes got a little watery. Thanks. Toshi. Tashinori smirked. Anytime, shonen. Izuku had a hilarious look on his face as he looked on at the pearly gates in front of him. Ooh. Are you a young man or a bad record? Tashinori teased with a grin. UA. You brought me to UA. Did we die? Am I in heaven? Izuku was practically starting to hyperventilate. Cut it out. Tashinori laughed. You'll be seeing those gates plenty of times in 8 months. He gave Izuku a badge. Stick that in your pocket. You'll need it for the security system to let you in. Why are we here? Izuku asked as he did as requested. We're meeting 2 people far more capable than me in terms of quirk diagnosis. If they can't figure out your quirk, no one can. They made their way through the campus and stopped at a fairly normal-looking gymnasium building. This is Gym Gamma, otherwise known as the training kitchen land. They opened the doors and went in, and this. Am I a mouse? A dog? A bear? All you need to know is that I'm the principal. A tiny creature standing on 2 legs and wearing fancy dress clothes and very unmatching shoes that looked just like Izuku's own sneakers greeted them. He had a mouse-like body, dog-like paws, and a bear-like face with a scar over his right eye. Your coat looks so luxurious today, Principal. Tashinori complimented him. The secret is keratin. Humans can't get color like this. The animal responded cheekily. Nice to meet you, sir. Izuku bowed to the animal, trying to keep from freaking out. He was meeting the principal? And this is Recovery Girl. Tashinori pointed out to short old woman with her gray hair in a bun. She had a cane shaped like a syringe in her hand. Her name was Chiyo Shizenji, and she was practically what kept UA running. They could never do the things they did without her healing quirk. How are you doing today, Midori-yakin? She held a hand out. Here, some Haribo candies. Thank you, Recovery Girl. Izuku responded. Has All Might told you why you're here today, Midoriya? Nizu asked him. Just a little. Izuku admitted shyly. We're here to test out my quirk, right? That's right. Nizu confirmed. Hopefully by the end of the day, you'll even have a name for it. The short little creature grinned cheerily at him. Now, please describe everything you've been able to do with your quirk as of now, as well as your parents' quirks. Well, Izuku hummed. My main ability seems to be telekinesis. The heaviest thing All Might has had me try lifting was the cab of an 18-wheeler. I can get it up for a couple seconds at best. So far, I seem to be able to only lift a couple objects at the same time, regardless of weight. If I really strain myself, my head starts to hurt, and I feel really tired afterwards. I can also do force blasts like All Might's punches if he used maybe a finger. Izuku told them, and Tashinori snorted at his description. The day I first used it, I actually had another completely different ability trigger. I got injured by a villain. I think he speared me right through the shoulder. My wound erupted into this blue fire that healed and completely purged the wound of that nasty stuff. I haven't been able to do anything like it since. He also spent about a minute covering his parents' quirks. And finally, he remembered back to that day at school again. Oh, I actually just remembered something. I think I was also able to read someone's mind. Tashinori coughed out some blood. PFFF, you never said a thing about that to me, shonen. Izuku poked his fingers together shyly. I kind of forgot. It was the day that thing with Kaken happened. Ah, that stopped Tashinori short. I suppose you did have plenty of other things on your mind that day. He replied softly. Very fascinating. That's quite a quirk you've got. Nizu smiled at him cheerily. How many years have you been using it? A couple of years? Izuku started and turned to Tashinori. You didn't tell them? He asked in disbelief. Tashinori grinned cheekily back at him. Don't ruin my fun, shonen. Until 2 months ago, I thought I was quirkless. He admitted sheepishly, and watched as both of the elders he was meeting with blanched. He hurried to explain, no matter how much I wished for it to appear, it never did. I had all but given up on that day. He poked his fingers together, head turned downward. I went to the doctors when I was 4. They said I should just give up, that it would never happen. 2 months? Nisa breathed, eyes wide in shock. Just 2 months? Recovery Girl had an entirely different reaction. Her eyes narrowed. They diagnosed you as quirkless? So the gene tests came back negative? The MRI scans did as well. Izuku looked at her for a few seconds, before tilting his head to the side. Huh? Off to the side. Tashinori was looking equally confused. Your gene tests. Recovery Girl replied impatiently. I'd like to see them at some point. Izuku eyed her in confusion. What gene tests? He asked a little helplessly. The two of them snapped shocked gazes to him. They just showed us the X-ray of my toe. Are you kidding me? The explosion for the tiny old lady almost blew them all backwards. The X-ray? That was what they used to crush a young child's dreams? I'll have their practices. I'll have their medical licenses. The kindly old lady was quite literally stewing in complete and utter rage. Izuku was almost hiding behind Tashinori. Slowly, she cooled herself down. Izuku-kun, that exam is merely supposed to be the first thing we look for. It is generally accepted as a tell of quirklessness, but it is not the end of the road. About 3% of the population with the extra joint still have a quirk. They're just very late bloomers because their quirks are normally harder to control. 6, 7, and 8 is pushing it. Conversely, about 1% of the population without the joint never develop a quirk. That is an ancient examination. Nowadays we test directly for the quirk factor. Izuku slowly lost feeling in his legs and slid to the floor. All this time, he'd been mistreated, ridiculed, and all but spat on by his peers on laziness? On medical malpractice? He clenched a fist, feeling frustration well up inside of him. I'm so sorry, kid, Tashinori said sadly, putting a hand on the boy's shoulder. I never knew about this either. Back in my day, the X-ray was all we had. Who was your doctor? Where does he work? Chio asked him gently. Izuku let out a sigh. He's dead. If he closed his eyes, he could still see his and Kaken's old friend's red wings holding him aloft in the air. He and his grandson went missing years ago. That brought the mood down to somber before the principal intervened. Nisa coughed. I'm sure you're frustrated, Midoriya, but we truly don't have much time here today. We have plenty to do to prepare for the next semester here, as well as get the summer events in order. I feel for you as well, but we need to move a little quicker. He clapped his hands as Izuku gave him a determined nod. He was sure that this wouldn't be forgotten anytime soon, but for now the boy would be able to ignore it. Now, first thing is first, we must figure out how to use your second ability. You say the only time you were able to use it was when you were injured, correct? He got a sharp nod from the boy and released a sigh in response. Then, as distasteful as it is, injured you must be. Unless you can get a feel for the ability, you'll never be able to call it up again. After all, much of learning your quirk is feeling it out. Recovery Girl still had a heavy scowl on her face, which only deepened at the principal's words. Unfortunate, but accurate. I will be here to aid you if you can't get the ability to trigger again. Izuku swallowed in a fair bit of apprehension, but nodded anyway. Recovery Girl took out a scalpel from her doctor's coat. Finger, please. Izuku held out a shaky hand, and the old woman grumbled for a moment about oaths before making a small incision. Izuku winced, but kept from crying out as a little blood started leaking through. Yet as the seconds went by, it was clear it wasn't activating. Izuku winced. Don't think that worked. Quirks aren't normally one-time things, Nizu said and looked a little morose. If that didn't work, then perhaps there is a threshold of pain or injury itself needed to activate unconsciously. We are not going to put a young child through pain like that. Recovery Girl snapped. Just this is bad enough. Izuku stared at his finger. The small cut was already clotting, and he clenched his fist. All might. He turned to stare at his mentor in determination as he rolled up his sleeve and held out his arm. Hit me. Midoriya Shonen. Tashinori's protest died on his lips as he stared at Izuku's determined gaze. We can figure this out another way. Recovery Girl's protests went unheeded. We tried small, Izuku said, a minor tremor in his tone betraying his fear. We're not going to get anywhere without some risk, right? Tashinori stared at him sadly. Ew. You're far too brave, Midoriya Shonen. Maybe even for your own good. He bulked up, turning into his hero form. He held a finger over his student's arm and pulled it back with his other hand. He allowed the finger to slip, and Izuku had to bite back a scream as even that tiny action ruptured tiny blood vessels in his arm and put a hairline fracture in his ulna. A bruise formed immediately as Izuku slowly went to his knees, cradling his inured arm. Chio bit her lip and forced herself to stay still, fighting her very nature which wanted only to help the child. And then Izuku's arm was enveloped in flame. They all recoiled, mentally preparing to be hit by the heat, only to be surprised when nothing happened. Izuku was watching the flame with shiny eyes, a peaceful smile on his face. It's cool. All Might slowly put a hand over it. It is. I don't feel any heat at all. The giant of a man said in surprise. Fascinating. Nizu exclaimed. How is your arm, Midoriya-san? Healed. Izuku chirped with a grin. It only took a second or two for the pain to go away, but I wanted to get a feel for it. Excellent. Shut it off and try to bring it back. Nizu told him, and they stepped away from the boy. Even if the fire hadn't felt hot, they were sure if that was actually the case. Izuku walked to the center of Gym Gamma and closed his eyes. His powers, they felt different now that he was aware of them. His telekinetic energy felt calm, powerful, and steady, unwavering. His fire was different. It was energetic. It made him feel excited and happy, like the sun was shining on him. He embraced that feeling, and his right arm was once again engulfed in bright blue flames. He grinned as he stared into its depths. I did it. Excellent work, Shonen. All Might called at him as they started walking forward again. Wait. Izuku held up a hand to stop them. I want to try something. He dispersed the flame, and this time tried to reach for both powers at once. This time the fire that arose was decidedly not cool and tingly. No, this was a primal, burning fire looking to consume all in its path. He squeaked in fear as the glowing emerald flames enveloped him in a firestorm. They quickly grew out of control and started to spread. It was only a second later that Izuku started to scream. Fire emergency. Nizu roared, all traces of his jovial nature gone at the sound of a child and future student howling in agony. The fire suppression systems activated, dumping a deluge of water from the ceiling. They all had to shield themselves from the heat, and almost started to panic as the water literally evaporated before it could do anything. All Might had enough listening to his student cry. Austin smash. He bellowed and thrust his palm forward. The extreme wind did what the water had not. The fire dispersed, leaving a wobbly, buckus-nude Midoriya Izuku in the middle of the gym. His blue flames covered him and were healing some pretty savage-looking burns. They had just discovered that he was decidedly not fireproof even to his own fire. It was only his healing ability, which did not in fact turn off his sense of pain, and in fact made things worse by regenerating his nerves only for them to get seared again, that kept him alive. Izuku shakily turned to them. Let's shelve that for now, shall we? He said in a squeaky voice, before keeling over and crashing to the floor. They all stared at the unconscious boy. What in the world is that Quirk? It took Izuku another 4 hours to wake up again, and by then they didn't have long left at UA. I'm sorry. Izuku apologized for the nth time. He was now dressed in a UA gym uniform and was practically fangirling over the fact that he would, by necessity if nothing else, be keeping it. He would treasure it forever. It's quite all right, young man. Nizu sighed, lamenting the lost day. This just means you'll have to do a bit less experimenting until you come here as a student. He gave him an icy glare. You will not be experimenting with that green fire outside of here, understand? It's far too dangerous without direct supervision and adequate training facilities. You'll probably not be able to use it at all for the next 8 months. Yes, sir. Izuku responded quickly. Truth be told, that fire had terrified him. He'd felt like he'd been cooking alive in there. Because he was. What nasty fire. He wasn't in any hurry to use it again. Good. Now, unfortunately we're out of time today, but you'll still have Tashinori to train you as well as your own healing abilities. I give you 2 permissions to experiment with your other abilities in your normal training grounds. Nizu said, and finally smiled cheerily again. To be honest, I'm rather beside myself with eagerness to see what you'll make of yourself, Midoriya-san. Your quirk is amazing, and if my suspicions are right, you may only be scratching the surface. Telekinesis and pyrokinesis, and if you can figure out how to do it again, telepathy are all subsets of psychic powers. So perhaps you should pick up a couple of those really old comics and manga from the turn of the millennium and the last millennium. You may find some amazing ideas in them that you're able to replicate. Izuku almost started to drool over the idea of finding himself some centuries-old stories to read. I will. Thank you for the advice, Principal. Nizu nodded. You're a good kid, Midoriya-san. I can see what Toshinori saw in you. You have great potential. He turned to the man in question as Izuku went scarlet. You intend to pass one for all to him, don't you? I do. Toshinori grinned. He's the perfect candidate. When I first offered it to him, he didn't even hesitate to think of others first. He wondered if it would be fair to others if he took it now that he had his quirk. That kind of selfless nature, his bravery, and his sense of justice are hard to come by. Even before he had his quirk, he didn't even hesitate to try to save someone from a villain. I agree, Nizu said, and that is why, even though I feel he really has the potential to succeed you as the symbol of peace, it pains me to say that he cannot become the next holder of One for All. Nizu let out a hard sigh and crossed his paws. Remind me again of the story your master told you? Of what happened to her when she first gained One for All? Toshinori blinked. Master? He squinted a little bit, trying to remember what she had told him in that laughing tone of hers. If I recall, the first time she tried to use float after she got One for All, he blanched, finally remembering. He dipped his head with a groan. She flew headfirst into a wall. Precisely, Nizu said with a sigh of his own. One for All overpowered float so badly, she nearly broke her own neck. And she had been training her quirk for years. Just what do you suppose it will do to his quirk? He asked in a tone that made it very clear the question was rhetorical. Izuku looked pale and clammy at the thought. Now there is no guarantee that this would happen. After all, one is hardly a large enough sample size. Nizu crossed his arms behind his back as Toshinori and Izuku went back to looking hopeful. So let us perform a scenario analysis on what would happen if Izuku were to accept One for All. He spoke with deadly seriousness. Scenario 1. Izuku accepts the quirk and they stay entirely separate. Now he has two quirks he has hardly any practice with. With the potential he's shown us with only 2 months of training, they may even end up being equally powerful. He now has to divide all his time in training two quirks that have nothing to do with one another. One for All is not a quirk you just have. He will break himself without dedicating his body to training it. He would have to leave his original quirk by the wayside, and I can see in his face that he clearly is not interested in that. Izuku looked down. No, I'm not. I finally have a quirk. Something to make me unique. Something that is all me. Exactly. Nizu eyed Toshinori as the man grew increasingly disappointed. Izuku would become a jack of all trades, master of none. He would be hurting his own potential by stretching himself too thin. His voice was grave, and he looked solemn, and that is the better scenario. The worst-case scenario is that One for All merges with his original quirk. All of the stockpiled power stored in your quirk, now powering his. He would far surpass me. Toshinori breathed in awe and then began to protest. He could be the greatest symbol this world has ever seen. Greater than me. Yes, if he could control it. What did we just discuss, Toshinori? You could never have met your master if she had killed herself flying into that wall. If Torino hadn't been there, she may have done just that. Nizu admonished the greatest hero, drawing a flinch at the name of his sensei. He would be breaking things with even the slightest touch of his quirk, crushing full trucks into soda cans, picking people up to rescue them, and putting them on the moon. How could he possibly learn control when even the lightest touch could be enough to send something he struggles with now straight into orbit? He could never use his quirk again. He'd be back where he started. For all intents and purposes, quirkless. All Might was looking even more deflated than usual. Chio spoke up, sounding as solemn as Nizu, in the doomsday scenario. The quirk immediately overwhelms him the first time he uses it, and he rips himself apart, just as an untrained One for All user would. No, Toshinori sagged, you're both right. It would be beyond foolishness for me to ignore your insight. You're far more intelligent than me, Principal. I'm sorry, Toshinori. Nizu said mournfully. I know how extremely happy you were to have found your successor. Izuku had stayed silent as the spoke, and he now stood up, and for once, it was him putting his hand on All Might's shoulder. I'm sorry, All Might. He smiled weakly. Looks like I messed things up already. Tashinori bulked up. This changes nothing, Shonen. I promise to train you as my successor until the entrance exam, and train you I shall. You're still my student and my successor, even if I can't give you one for all. He stood and put on a brave face. We'll make you the greatest hero in the world yet, Midoriya Shonen. He started laughing a little boisterously. I guess this does mean we can cut the physical training out of our schedule, though. And here's my promise to you, All Might. Izuku held out a fist to his mentor. I'll search high and low if I have to. We'll find your successor to one for all. He then surprised All Might with his next statement, and we should still keep it in. A hero shouldn't be a one-trick pony, right? All Might smiled, once more seeing the potential of his successor. Even if things weren't going to go the way he wished, he could rest easy knowing someone like Izuku Midoriya was part of the next generation. He bumped his fist against his students, sealing the promise. I don't think your quirk counts as just one trick, but it is up to you. Finally, Chiyo and Nizu smiled again, and she spoke up, on a much happier note. I think I may have thought up a name for your quirk, Midoriyakin. Really? Izuku grinned happily, blushing more than a little. What is it? She looked up at him and smiled. Hope rises like a phoenix from the ashes of shattered dreams. It was an old quote, and she didn't quite remember where she had read it. While Izuku had been unconscious, she'd heard from All Might about Izuku's life prior to that fateful day. The words most certainly applied. Had his quirk not awakened, or All Might not been around to offer up one for all, she wasn't sure where this poor boy would be now. Your life before your quirk awakened and your life from now on will be completely different. With the abilities you've displayed, your new quirk shall be named. She stopped and literally had Izuku at the edge of his seat. She waited just a moment more and said just 2 words. Chapter 2, A New Beginning. A large fridge was falling from the sky, enveloped in a green glow. Below it, All Might casually sidestepped and it crashed onto the beach, throwing up a deluge of sand. Your throws are gaining power, Shonen. His voice boomed as he stared up at his successor. Izuku was floating in midair, his body glowing his signature emerald. His light shirt was barely hanging onto his frame, in tatters. That had been the result of just the air pressure from one of his mentor's punches. Not even one of his smashes either, just a regular punch. The one for all wielder's strength truly was no joke. True to his word, Izuku had not focused entirely on his quirk during their training. His flames of regeneration had proved a godsend, enabling him to drastically cut down on his physical recovery time. Much of his baby fat had already been burned away, and he was starting to show signs of some muscle definition. He was a far cry from where All Might would have wanted if they were still planning on giving him one for all, but no longer was he the same scrawny kid that always got beat on endlessly. He was still dripping in sweat from his spar with his mentor, and still breathing quite hard. It made him quite thankful that the cold of fall hadn't started coming in yet. Yet still, he began to smile. Thanks, All Might. He called back, before the glow around him intensified and his form blurred. All Might threw up an arm and blocked Izuku's roundhouse kick. His feet didn't even budge despite the massive blowback kicking up a sandy dervish behind him. He grabbed Izuku's leg and with nary a grunt of effort, chucked the boy across the lot and towards one of the piles of garbage. Izuku's body flashed before it vanished entirely, and All Might ducked as his student's leg passed where his head had been. A second teleportation found Izuku below him, throwing up a vicious uppercut. Yet All Might moved out of the way with such speed that he ended up behind the green-haired boy, as a column of force ripped through the air where his head had been moments ago. He threw his fist out and split the glowing husk of a car that had been hurtling towards him in half. His punch put a hole into one of the scrap piles which started collapsing in on itself. And before his student could react, he whirled around and grabbed him by the back of the neck. With the sound of breaking glass, Izuku's psychic barrier shattered as All Might slammed him into the ground. The boy didn't move except to breathe, blowing small little bits of sand away from his face as he groaned. Marvelous. All Might beamed at his exhausted pupil. Simply marvelous, Midoriya Shonen. You've already come so far these past 4 months. He helped Izuku up and grinned at him. Your quirk may be amazing, but your work ethic and determination has allowed you to turn it into something truly spectacular. He gave his green-haired student a thumbs up. You keep this up, and you'll be ready to succeed me in no time. Izuku grinned tiredly, but before he could say anything more, something happened which shocked the two of them to their cores. That was amazing. A new voice yelled and nearly gave the two of them heart attacks. What a hot-blooded battle. Izuku froze and a shiver ran down his spine as he whipped around. I thought no one came around here. All Might turned to the newcomer in panic. Holy shit. Holy shit. Not now. The person rushing up to them looked young like Izuku, though they couldn't be more different. He had dark hair with a buzz cut and rather beady eyes that were incredibly sharp. He was very tall for what was probably his young age, being more than a head taller than Izuku, and he had a much heavier build. He clearly had seen the inside of a gym quite often. He was wearing board shorts and a tank top. Completing his look was an absolutely gigantic smile reminiscent of All Might himself. All Might, who was currently panicking as his fear came to pass. BMF. A weird sound accompanied his explosion into his trademarked steam cloud, and Toshinori was revealed. The new guy froze, his smile still wide on his face though his eyes were popping out, before tipping over still in his running position and crashing face first into the sand. Voila! He raised himself quickly and stared at Toshinori. All Might. He cried out, "What happened?" Toshinori stared at him deadpanned for a moment, before whipping around towards Izuku. 5 years. 5 years I went, and not a single soul ever found out. I meet you, and there are 3 and 4 months. He shook his fist at his sweating student. Are you a magnet attracting people to my secret? Do you have another quirk we don't know about? Blood was spewing from his mouth as he pointed at his student. Izuku stammered apologies at his master, before his mind kicked into overdrive. Mumble, mumble, mumble. Had such a quirk. Mumble, mumble, mumble. Secret attraction quirk would be an incredible boon in interrogations. Mumble, mumble, mumble. The newcomer's sweat dropped, staring at the mumbling teen in confused amusement. Finally, Toshinori got fed up with Izuku in his analysis mode and clapped him on the chin and head simultaneously. It was a joke, you prince of nonsense. Izuku rubbed his chin sheepishly, sorry. Toshinori shook his head in fond exasperation before pointing at the newcomer. You. What is your name, Shonen? The boy jumped to his feet as Toshinori put on his commanding voice and stood stiff as a board, as if Toshinori were a military general. Inasa Yurashi. Pleased to meet you both. His huge grin came back as he bowed so low he was bent at a 90-degree angle. Same to you, Yurashi Shonen. My own name is Toshinori Yagi, and my student here is Izuku Midoriya. Toshinori replied, now? He sighed and sat on a piece of the car he had ripped apart. You know how some people hold in their gut and puff out their chest when at the pool? Inasa nodded in confusion. Yeah, it's kind of like that. I got badly injured around 5 years ago. This is my real form nowadays. Don't go writing about this on the internet, got it? That's... Inasa shook his face devoid of his grin, before it came back with a vengeance. Incredible. So incredibly hot-blooded. His fist shook in front of him. You're amazing, All Might. Even gravely injured, you still puff out your chest and protect us all. Truly an inspiration to all heroes. I am honored to be a holder of your secret. This time, he bowed so low that his face crashed into a small mini-fridge lying in the sand and dented it. Izuku goggled and Toshinori wasn't much better. You know, that would be a bit more convincing if you weren't shouting at the top of your lungs. Izuku had a comical look on his face as he snarked at the taller boy. Inasa lifted himself up with an even more comical expression, complete with blood pouring down his face. Sorry. He rubbed the back of his head a little sheepishly. I always have that problem. I just get way too overly excited sometimes. I am serious, though. I would never break your trust, All Might. I respect you far too much. He gave him a much more subdued bow this time. It's quite all right. I don't think I have any right to reprimand someone for being too loud. Toshinori quirked a grin, and they all shared a small snicker at the thought. We'll trust you, Yurashi Shonen. Don't disappoint us. Awesome. Inasa straightened out and grinned over towards Izuku. Anyway, your quirk is amazing, my man. So hot-blooded. He grinned and started levitating, an eddy of air currents supporting him. I've never met anyone else able to fly like me. Usually they have wings or something. Izuku and Tashinori both snapped their eyes to the sand, which was waving about as if carried by a current. Izuku said what was on both of their minds. Wind? That's right. Inasa Yurashi. Quirk, whirlwind. He stuck a hand out for Izuku to shake. Let's be friends, my man. Izuku stiffened. Friends? Tashinori grinned and looked away. That's the way, shonen. Perhaps this is your new beginning. Izuku smiled shakily. Sure. Friends then. He clapped his hand into Inasa's and almost had to wince. The guy had a strong grip. Inasa's grin was so blinding Izuku could swear the sun was pinging on his teeth. Awesome. He cheered. What's your quirk anyway? I couldn't figure it out during your spar. Ah. Izuku beamed as he began to speak. He truly loved being able to talk about his quirk. The more he did, the more he realized it was real and not going away. My quirk is called Phoenix Force. I'm a psychic. Wah. Inasa yelled in shock. For real? Like the comic books? Holy crap, you don't fight anything like them. Most of them just sit in the back like wimps. He started laughing boisterously. You're awesome, dude. Tashinori chuckled as Izuku went red. That's because he spent too long wanting to be like me. Izuku went scarlet. I've been weaning him off of trying to emulate me too much. He does far better with kicks than he does punches, for example. I'll say, those teleporting kicks were sick, dude. Inasa lightly punched Izuku in the shoulder. Ah, Yurishisa. Izuku started to speak, but his new friend cut him off. Inasa, the taller boy interrupted. That's my name, dude. Use it. Inasa-san, how come you came by here? No one ever does. It's why All Might chose this place to train me. Izuku asked him curiously. Inasa used his wind power to lift a fridge and bring it over, sitting on it. Well, my dream is to make it into UA, and just a few weeks ago my parents told me that my school had managed to secure a recommendation for me. He grinned proudly. So I came to scout out the surrounding areas to see if I could find a nice place, and I heard about the beach. I couldn't resist going for a swim since the weather probably is going to get pretty crappy soon enough. While I was swimming, I saw all this garbage at the other end of the beach, saw that, and everyone was avoiding it like the plague. I happened to see an explosion over here when I was in the water, so I came to check it out. Thank you, Yorishi Shonen. Perhaps we'll need to be a bit less zealous when training, Midoriya Shonen. Tashinori commented. It could have been bad if someone else had seen us. Yeah, he murmured, a little disappointed that they wouldn't be able to go all out anymore. He then shook himself. Wait a second. You got a recommendation to UA. That's amazing. You're so awesome, Inasa-san. Wahaha. Yep, they have always been my first choice. He held his hand beside his mouth and leaned forward as if telling a secret. I'm kinda tempted to go to Shiketsu instead, though. Have you seen their sick hats? Izuku burst out laughing, and Tashinori followed. Where has the time gone, dude? Izuku and Inasa found themselves back at the beach where they had met all those months ago. Both of them were sitting on the sea barrier, though lounging was a more apt descriptor for Inasa. Fall had come, and winter had almost gone. The weather was turning milder now, and the sakura trees were even starting to bloom in some parts of Japan. Some of Inasa's boisterous attitude had rubbed off on Izuku. Having a friend had done wonders for the boy, even if Inasa could really only visit on the weekends. Just think. A wide smile was on his lips. By this time in 2 weeks, we'll both be UA students. Classes were almost over, and it was time for possibly the most grueling exams they would ever take. Deliberation post-exams usually took about a week. 2 weeks, and their futures would be known. They watched the waves, and Inasa clapped him on the back. It's still amazing to think of what a dump this place was when I first saw it. You're a great guy, my man. Even if it was for training, you really cleaned this place up. You helped, Izuku retorted, though he was still smiling and a little pink. Inasa scoffed, barely, and only on weekends. You did the lion's share, dude. Be proud. Indeed. They both jumped as All Might spoke up behind them. Neither had known the man was there. Yorishi Shonen. Might I have a moment with Midoriya Shonen? Sure. Inasa grinned and leapt to his feet. I was about to head home anyway. I'll see you next weekend, bro. A clap sounded as Izuku and Inasa dapped. Later, Izuku waved as his friend ran off. What's this about, All Might? All Might deflated, though he still had a giant grin on his face even as Tashinori. I wanted to tell you how proud I am, Midoriya Shonen. Izuku went scarlet at his mentor's tender tone. You are going to do great things, my boy. You're going to be a greater symbol of peace than I ever was. All Might. And like usual, Izuku reverted to stammering at praise. Even 10 months hadn't been enough to erase years of poor treatment and ridicule. He simply didn't really know how to react to a compliment. My only regret is not being able to give you one for all. You truly are the best successor I could have asked for. Izuku smiled, and his eyes got a little watery. I'm so thankful. I almost feel like I've cheated. You've helped me so much. I've been so lucky. He wiped his eyes with an arm. Oi, what are you saying now? This has all been your effort. He chuckled boisterously like an Asa. And we really need to fix those leaky eyes of yours. Look around you, Shonen. 10 months ago, this beach was a dilapidated trash heap. Not a speck of grime remains today. You even cleaned outside of where I told you to. All of this was you. None of it was luck, and you went through much hardship in the past to get here. Being lucky and being born with a silver spoon in your mouth is very different from working your butt off and earning it. Take that to heart. If you were going to be receiving my quirk, you would have already earned it thrice over. He clapped a hand onto Izuku's shoulder. I'm afraid we can't have the awards ceremony you deserve today, Midoriya Shonen. Instead, your reward for all your hard work will be the start of your dreams. Izuku stared up at All Might, who clenched a fist in front of him. Your hero academia awaits. Shonen, go out and claim your prize. Izuku nodded sharply. Yes, sir. Puhua. There was something different about being in front of UA's gate for Real. The last time he'd been here, they'd gone through another gate meant for vehicles. He could see the busts of old, famous heroes staring at the path leading up to the beautiful, all-glass main campus building. Some of the more egotistical students probably figured they were getting the royal welcome. Move aside, Deku. He heard a familiar voice behind him and reflexively flinched to the side. Even if the sandy blonde hadn't tormented him at all the past 10 months, ever since their rather explosive confrontation in their school, old habits died hard. Out of the way, or I'll kill you, his old friend snarled. Good to see some things never change. Izuku snorted lightly as the thought ran through his mind. He tried to smile supportively and fell into step beside the boy. Good morning to you too, Kakin. Let's do our best. Or rather, he would have fallen into step if he hadn't been so overly excited and tripped over his own damn feet. Of course. His face was deadpan. My life ends before it begins. He then wondered what was taking so long for the ground to meet his face. He looked down and goggled at the fact that he was floating. He hadn't used his own quirk. He really should have, in retrospect. He needed to get better about using it instinctively in everyday life. But having no quirk for so long made things slow going. So why wasn't he falling? Ah, got you. Are you okay? A female voice said happily. It's a bad omen to fall on a day like this, you know. I used my quirk to catch you. Sorry. Izuku fought the urge to flail and instead righted himself with his psychic abilities. Wow, that was cool. The girl said cheerily as she clapped her hands together. He turned around and was almost blinded by how much of a bundle of joy and happiness this girl seemed to resemble. Even her cheeks seemed to have a perpetual blush on them. She had fair skin, big, round brown eyes, and shoulder-length brown hair styled into 2 long locks beside her face. She also had microbangs which swept to her left and a short bob at the back. Thanks. Izuku managed to squeak out, his face bright pink. I just talked to a girl. Inasa may have been his first friend, but a cute girl he was not. No problem, she replied cheerily. Man, this sure is nerve-wracking, isn't it? We better get going. Good luck on the exam. With that, she raced away. Izuku stood there for another minute or two, unable to think of anything else but that encounter. Roughly 10 minutes later, he found himself beside Katsuki in a giant auditorium. The energy and tension in the room was palpable. It almost felt like a physical force. And then their proctor showed up. For every one of you little listeners, welcome to my show. Everybody say hee. The man with blonde, extremely long gelled hair swept back and upwards cupped an ear with his hand. Silence. He shrugged, a massive grin still on his face. What a refined response. That's cool too, my little listeners. Time to show you then. I'll present the specifics of today's practical exams. Are you ready? Yeah. Again, he was the only one who shouted. Everyone was just too nervous or fanboying like Izuku. It's the voice hero, present Mike. Awesome. He almost squealed, hiding his face partially behind his hands. I listen to his talk show every week. He's so inspirational. I guess all the teachers really are pro-heroes here. Mumble, mumble, mumble. Shut it. Katsuki snapped from his place beside Izuku. This is how the test will go, little listeners. You'll all be doing 10-minute-long dry runs against villains we will be providing. These are mock cityscape battles, so you can bring anything you want with you. After this presentation, you'll be moving to your assigned battlegrounds. Consecutive IDs are all assigned to different locations. Izuku mumbled, after taking a peek at Katsuki's sheet as well as the unknown person next to him. Katsuki also realized what was going on. That's so people from the same school can't just form a group and slay the exam together. Huh? Probably. Izuku replied, we're much more unlikely to form a team with random strangers, and even less likely to actually trust them or be able to coordinate abilities with such a time limit. Humph. Katsuki snorted, I'll just crush them all. But it looks like you get to live another day, Deku. They started paying attention to present Mike again. Each site is full of 3 different types of villains. You can think of it like that old retro game, Super Mario. Every type of enemy is worth a different amount of points, from 1 to 3. And that's your goal, little listeners. You want to use your quirks to destroy or incapacitate as many of these faux villains as possible and rack those points up. He grinned and waved a finger at them, as if chiding a disobedient child. And of course, playing a naughty antihero is strictly forbidden. No attacking fellow examinees or else. My kind of test. Katsuki had a mad grin on his face, almost salivating at what was to come. May I ask a question? A tall, muscular boy stood up with his arm raised high. Present Mike agreed and pointed at him, causing a spotlight to shine down. He looked like he moved incredibly stiffly. Whether that was nerves or otherwise was unknown. He had blue-tinted black hair, combed perfectly, and square-rimmed glasses. He raised his provided sheet of paper and pointed to it. There appear to be no less than 4 faux villains printed on this sheet. If that is a misprint, then as the most prominent school in Japan, UA should be ashamed of such a foolish mistake. We are here as examinees in this place because we wish to be molded into exemplary heroes. He then whirled around. And you too. You've been muttering this whole time. If you're just here to fool around, you should leave. His voice was loud and prominent as he stared intensely at the pair. Katsuki immediately retorted with a cocky smirk on his face. Or what? 4 eyes. Izuku dipped his head in exasperation at the answer, mentally apologizing for the disruption. But before things could escalate, Present Mike interrupted. Okay, good catch. Examinee 7111. He then surprised them by letting out a very sinister-sounding chuckle, though perhaps you'll wish you hadn't asked. See, if the previous villains are comparable to Goombas and Koopa, then these guys are the thwomps. They're more like traps than targets. His laugh got even more sinister. There is only one of this type of villain at each site, but they're going to rampage in close quarters. If you get caught by it or engage it in combat, a wave of terror seemed to engulf the room. You lose every single point you already earned. Even the person who asked the question seemed to be unable to speak, not even thanking Present Mike as he collapsed into his seat. Everyone, even Katsuki, had some amount of sweat dripping down the sides of their faces and their hearts were hammering in their chests. That's all from me, little listeners. Present Mike switched back to his normal, happy self. I'll leave you with our school motto. As the great hero Napoleon Bonaparte once said, true heroism consists of being superior to all the ills of life. Plus ultra. He grinned again. Break a leg, everyone. Izuku had switched out of his school attire and had equipped his normal workout gear, the green and white tracksuit. Despite all the training he'd done with All Might and confidence building he'd done with Inesa, he couldn't help but feel some of the anxiety he'd been trying to hold back set in. What if I'm just not good enough? I've only been training for 10 months. Everyone here has been preparing for years. I can't disappoint All Might. He put so much time and effort into me. A light sheen of sweat had started building on his forehead, and he wiped it away. We have no idea how many villains there are. What if I'm too slow and they all get taken out quickly? He wasn't the only one fighting back their nerves. One person tried to mask it with boisterous shouting. Look how huge this place is. Only at UA, right? They're supposed to have a bunch of different grounds like this. The old Izuku wouldn't have noticed that they were merely hiding their nervousness, seeing only confidence while he shook in terror. Funnily enough, seeing that he wasn't the only one affected calmed him a little. Instead, he started taking note of how some of them even had equipment with them. He wasn't sure what the blonde guy's quirk was, but it probably had to do with that belt he wore. He then jumped a little. Oh, it's her. We're in the same battle group. He started walking forward, intending on thanking her again, when a hand grabbed his shoulder and he jumped. Just what do you think you're doing? The intense guy from earlier who had called him and Kakanao glared at him. That girl seems to be doing some kind of meditation. Are you hoping to interfere and throw her off her game? He had switched out of his uniform as well into some skin-tight workout clothes, and he ended up being as muscular as Izuku figured he would be. All around, he could hear murmurs. That guy tripped over his own feet at the gate earlier. What a joke. Oh well, once less rival, right? Izuku had resolved himself to try to be more confident, so he swallowed and shot what he hoped was an intense look of his own back. Or maybe I met her earlier and wanted to try to help. Did you ever think of that? The guy reared back, but then narrowed his eyes suspiciously. What's with the stuttering? Are you telling the truth? Izuku started getting irritated. Of course I am. What kind of hero would do something like that? The boy found that an acceptable response and was going to apologize profusely for misjudging his fellow competitor, but he never got the chance. Aeon start. Everyone froze, question marks appearing over their heads. Present Mike loudly yelled at them again. What are you waiting for? An invitation? The test has started. Run, run. Izuku turned around and nearly panicked as he noticed everyone else had already run off, some of them even laughing. Probably at him, since he hadn't moved. I can't lose. Not here. Not after All Might did for me. His body was enveloped in his signature emerald glow, and 2 seconds later, he was past everyone except for the intense guy, who was really freaking fast. Everyone who had spent the last couple minutes mocking him almost dropped to the ground in shock. Everyone broke off into different directions, and an explosion sounded from his left. A massive robot with a thick wheel as a base and shielded dual freaking Gatlings for arms had crushed straight through the building. Target acquired. Terminate. It aimed its arm, which started spinning ominously, and prepared to fire. Izuku grabbed it with his telekinesis and lifted it into the air before throwing his arm down, which sent the bot crashing into the pavement. The bot sparked and started sparking as it broke apart before exploding. I did it, he shouted in his own head, filled with elation. I can do this. I can do this. He raced forward, feet no longer even touching the ground. The next enemy he saw was a three-pointer. It looked like a crawling tank with missile launchers on its back. The blonde boy who had the belt had his arms behind his head in some funky pose. His belt was lighting up and preparing to do something. Izuku teleported forward and appeared above the bot. A force blast directly downward pulverized it and the ground beneath it. The blonde had been one of the ones who had been poking fun at him earlier, and Inesa had rubbed off on him. Thanks for the assist. Good distraction, he quipped at the fallen boy, before using his telekinesis to get him back on his feet and teleporting away. The blonde was left with a slightly sour expression before regaining his look of supreme confidence and going hunting. He appeared directly above the city and whirled around, searching for more enemies to fight. He saw a group of 5 of the two-pointers, scorpion-looking bots with vicious-looking stingers, surrounding one of the people who had been the loudest when making fun of him. He looked like he was panicking. Even from this distance, it was clear he was trembling. He raced forward, pulling something out from his pocket. Strangely enough, it was just his tie. His emerald power enveloped it, and it straightened out, somehow managing to look sharp despite being a normal piece of cloth. The loop which would have kept it on his neck was now just a round circle for him to grip on. He teleported and sliced apart one of the machines with a metallic-sounding shine. The bot crackled and fizzed before exploding. The others immediately zeroed in on him as the bigger target. The stinger on the leader shot forward and Izuku deflected it with his glowing green sword before slashing the air. A sharp wave of force shot forward. There had been a bot maneuvering behind his target to get into position, so the flying slash cut both of them apart. A quick push with his free hand saw the last two blasted into a building and exploding. He was about to take off again when a shaky voice called out, "Sorry for making fun of you earlier, kid. You're a real hero. Thanks." The guy he had saved had thanked him and called him a hero. A warm, fuzzy feeling was enveloping him. Izuku grinned madly. No problem. He called before flying up again and searching for more people to save. This was what he had always dreamed of. I'm doing it, All Might. He yelled in utter glee, trying to keep from crying in joy. I'm doing it. In a darkened room, Tashinori stood before a massive number of panels along with a dozen others. His gaze was focused on his student, and a massive grin was splitting his skeletal face. That's the way, kid. Another person spoke up. Such a wide battlefield, and the time limit brings out the best in them. Another picked up from where he left off. Those who can assess a situation in moments. Information gatherers. An image of a tall prospect with what looked like wings and other appendages stood on top of a building. A squeakier voice continued. Those who will never be late to the party. Mobility experts. A video of the intense boy with glasses crashing through a three-pointer with a kick appeared, followed by one of izuku teleporting into the midst of their enemies. Those who can cope with any situation. Decision-makers. The blonde kid Izuku had interrupted was flamboyantly blasting through three-pointers with his naval laser. It switched to Izuku using his sword to defend against a squadron of one-pointers before sending one crashing into its compatriots and ending them all. A female voice piped up, sounding very throaty, and of course, combat experts. The natural-born warriors. An explosion engulfed the screen before clearing, revealing Katsuki Bakugo standing amongst the shredded husks of half a dozen enemy bots. It then switched to Izuku again, passing through a squadron like the Shinigami was possessing him. The abilities needed to preserve peace in our cities are judged by the points they earn. The squeaky voice said. Quite a crop we have this year, huh? The female said, followed the sound of her licking her lips. Nah, no way to tell yet. Tashinori finally spoke. This should tell us more. He flipped open the protective casing of a button labeled Yaruki switch and firmly pressed it. Immediately, pandemonium started erupting on the screens as the titanic final villain appeared. It was a behemoth taller than most of the buildings and was capable of casually pushing them over. Dozens of student prospects simply started turning tail and running as the city broke around it, passing by their fallen examinees who weren't quite able to get away with barely a glance in their directions. People show their true colors when they face that thing. One of the males replied to him. The one-for-all-wielder's grin hadn't vanished from watching his pupil, and likely wouldn't for several hours too. When they have nothing to gain, no, when they have everything to lose, rising to the challenge at those times is surely the mark of a great hero. Izuku's eyes had grown wide as dust and grit from collapsed buildings surrounded him and his fellow examinees. The only thing saving him from a couple hours of irritated eyes was his psychic barrier keeping it flowing around him. When it cleared, it revealed the massive green enemy. It had a flat face with a bunch of red eyes and massive hands. It truly was the definition of overwhelming. It was decimating the city in its rampage. All around him, examinees were running for their lives and points. None had forgotten the warning from Present Mike. The intense and incredibly fast boy passed by him with a glance, wondering if maybe the surprisingly powerful boy had been utterly rooted in terror. The glance ended, and he sped past, not bothering to lend him a hand. Izuku stared for a moment longer, before making to turn away like the rest. Have to avoid that thing and keep earning points. Only that didn't happen. Something made him freeze. A small cry of pain reached his ears. He jerked back and saw the dust settle in front of the amazingly bright girl who'd saved him from a faceplant earlier in the day. It's a bad omen to fall on a day like this, you know. Her bubbly voice rang in his head, contrasting powerfully with the look of pain and fear on her face as she tried to pull herself out from underneath a broken slab of concrete. She tried to inch out, and when that failed, tried to reach back and tap the concrete, but she was unable to reach. Her fingertips barely brushed, which didn't seem to be good enough. The villain stopped before her and reached for her body. Izuku didn't think. A second ago, he was over 100 meters away, and now he was directly beside her. She gasped, a look of horror flowing over her features as Izuku leapt at the villain's hand, swinging his sword tie and completely splitting the massive, metallic appendage in twain. No, she cried out as she realized what that meant. Izuku's brain caught up with him when he reached the apex. His eyes were shadowed as he floated above the behemoth, but it was easy to see the tears pouring down his face because they were dripping down. His extreme emotions intensified the glow around his body, and he lifted the blade with finality. A hoarse cry of despair and fury rang out from him, catching the attention of all the examinees who hadn't already been gaping at the destroyed arm. The glow around his tie was half a dozen times larger than the no longer flimsy piece of cloth, and he swung down after hooking his other hand into the loop for a two-handed grip. The two halves of the massive enemy literally sprang apart as if they were spring-loaded after an emerald light seemed to travel down its form. It happened so fast it took a second for the explosions to start. All the examinees stared in dumbfounded shock as the enemy, which had so terrified them, was utterly annihilated in two blows. And then the screaming began. The girl's eyes widened in horror as the boy who saved her dropped his tie, which fluttered harmlessly in the wind as it blew away, and clutched his head, howling in complete and utter agony. The pain in his head was excruciating. It felt like someone had taken an industrial blender directly to his brain and dialed it to 11. He started falling, in no condition to even think coherently, much less use his powers any longer. The girl fought her panic and produced strength she didn't know she had, lifting the concrete which had immobilized her earlier with a grunt of determination. She then limped over to the head of one of the enemies she had taken out and touched it. It started floating and she hopped on, floating up to meet her savior, where she threw her body at him and managed an unfortunately hard slap to his face. Her powers made him float too, and he slowed enough to fall almost gently to the pavement. She clasped her hands together, and both she and her savior crashed down. Then, a green hue overtook her skin, and her cheeks and eyes bulged. She bent over and vomited down the side of the monstrous metal head she lay on. Even though she had saved him, the boy was still writhing on the floor, clutching his head and crying out in pain. "Make way!" Her attention was drawn to an old lady running towards them. Everything about her clothing made it clear that she was a healer, and that thought made her realize the exam had to be over. She must have missed the announcement entirely in her hurry to keep him from splattering. Recovery girl, that was her name. She heard from the blonde boy with the belt, hurried over, and her lips stretched away from her face, kissing the boy on top of his head, smooch. A glow enveloped her hero, different from the one he'd sported during the exam. It was a different color and centered on his head. Slowly, his cries came to a halt, and he stopped writhing. "He'll be okay." The brunette sighed in relief. Thank goodness. She slumped back down, narrowly avoiding putting her cheek on her vomit, which was good because she probably would have just hurled again. Recovery girl drew her attention again, though. What a scary Quirk, though. She was staring beyond Izuku for a moment, before she turned away and started going to the others, stopping momentarily to heal her ankle. She hadn't even realized how much it hurt until the relief had set it, before moving on. She turned her head to see what Recovery Girl had been talking about, only for her jaw to drop. Izuku hadn't just cut the robot in half. Yue had a new freaking canyon. Away from them, the tall, intense boy was also staring, though his fists were clenched. All around him, others were talking. He jumped right at that thing. What an idiot. He lost all his points. Was his jumpiness just an act to get us to lower our guards earlier? He was so freaking strong. Just what is his quirk? The boy adjusted his glasses. That's not it. Weren't they even watching? He looked at the brunette, who herself was watching as the heroic student was wheeled away. He jumped in to save that girl. The remaining time, his own safety, even his points. He didn't even hesitate. His fists were almost clenched hard enough to draw blood as he remembered simply passing by other examinees. Of course, if this hadn't been an exam, I would have done the same. He thought as he bit his lip. Later, he would realize how fake that declaration was even in his own mind. It would lead him to do quite a bit of soul-searching as he compared himself to the real hero in this exam. Ultimately, it would galvanize him and make him work harder than ever. But for now, those thoughts weren't in his mind. Instead, it was almost like a light bulb went off. The exam. He went back to grinding his teeth. Could it be? If the exam is structured like that, then he... The brunette had managed to get herself back up and was stomping away with determination in her gaze. That boy had lost all his points to save her life, and like hell was she going to sit around and do nothing. The proctors were going to listen to her, or else. The weekend had arrived, and Izuku lackadaisically made his way to his training site. His gaze was unfocused as he walked, and his face was despondent. When he arrived, Inasa was already there, waiting for him. He sat down roughly and glanced over at his friend. For a moment, he forgot his own depression. Rarely had he seen such a look on his energetically happy friend. "You all right?" Inasa was staring at the waves with such an intense, stiff gaze he resembled the guy from the exams. "I never told you, did I?" Inasa finally spoke. "When I was young, I had a hero I admired the same way you admire All Might." Even now, he wasn't looking to his friend, instead glaring out at the rising sun. "I think heroism is all about bringing the heat. A hero's fiery soul ignites passion and hope in people. So when I first saw Endeavor, I loved him, man. Thought he was the hottest guy around. I wanted to be just like him." He spat to the side. "I went to get his autograph once, you know. He just brushed me aside." He looked at Izuku. "No, he didn't just brush me aside. He literally knocked me over and snarled at me to stay out of the way. His eyes, man, it was like his eyes dunked me in ice water. He had no spirit in him at all. Just icy rage." He clenched his fist. "I met his son at my own exam. The recommended students get a different one from you guys. I spotted him almost immediately, 'cause he had those same damn eyes. I can't accept either of them as heroes." He cried out furiously. "As far back as I could remember, I had never been afraid of anything. Before I knew it, I was totally obsessed with heroes. They dive headfirst into trouble and give it their all. That fire and drive was everything to me. So when I saw those eyes so full of hate, staring out at something in the far distance, I couldn't stand it. But still, Endeavor's son had the red-hot skills. I thought that maybe those icy eyes wouldn't matter, that I could make friends with him. But that damn bastard wouldn't even look at me." He pounded a fist into the barrier. "I don't want to be in the same class as this guy. I'm going to reject my admission." After days of numbness, Izuku finally had a spark of life in his gaze once more. "You can't do that." He leapt and put both hands on his friend's shoulders, forcing him to look at him. "UA is your dream, dude, just like mine. You can't let one person ruin your dreams." Inasa still looked mulish, so Izuku continued speaking passionately. "Besides, you don't know anything about the guy? Maybe he has a reason for the way he acts. You don't know if he's been through a tragedy or anything like that. Shouldn't it be our jobs as heroes to help people like that? To inspire hope? You can't just run away." Was all that talk about spirit lip service? Inasa's jaw was clenched as Izuku backed away, and his knuckles popped, before he surprised Izuku by punching himself in the face. "Wah. Dude, stop doing that." "You're right." Inasa spat a bit of blood away. "You're right. That is what a hero would do, isn't it?" He chuckled. "Thanks for knocking some sense into me, my man." "You did that yourself," Izuku retorted quickly, before slumping and laying down on the sand. Spread eagle. "You didn't look so happy yourself. What happened?" Inasa asked, and Izuku's face closed up again. He let out a resigned sigh. "I failed." "What?" Inasa's explosion was as predictable as one of Kakin's. "There was a trap enemy in our exams." Izuku groaned heavily. "Getting caught by it or engaging with it reduced your points to 0. There was a girl." Inasa's face lit up. "She was in trouble." He closed his eyes. "Before I knew what was happening, I was cutting its arm in half to save her." "PFFF, you don't really think UA would do something like that, do you? That was probably just to put you guys to the real test. You have so much fire in you, dude. They can't possibly reject a hot-blooded guy like you." He laughed boisterously, trying to cheer his friend up. Izuku closed his eyes. "I actually thought of that too. I even figured you might be right." Tears started leaking from his shut eyelids. "But it's been 3 days, and All Might hasn't contacted me. Hasn't even replied to the texts I sent him." He cried out. The smile fell away from Inasa's face, and he gaped at his friend. "No way." He went right back to furious, jumping down and walking closer to his friend. "That's bullshit." He roared. "No way could a hero school reject a real hero like you. There's just no way." He stomped back and forth, before stopping near his friend and throwing a hand out. "You're right that I shouldn't let go of my dreams over one person. But this is different. If they really reject a hot-blooded guy like you, then maybe UA isn't really the greatest hero school." He stared hard into Izuku's eyes. "If you don't get in, I'm not going either." We'll both go to Shiketsu and show those bastards what being a real hero means. Got it? Izuku swallowed, his throat tight at what his friend was willing to give up for him. He started crying again, before clapping his hand into Inasa's and allowing himself to get pulled up. Got it. Inasa finally started grinning again. Right on. He pumped a fist. So, want to get a spar going and get the blood pumping? Izuku chuckled lightly. Sorry, but I can't. My quirk has been on the fritz for a few days. I think I overused it during the exams. I've been told to take it easy. Oh, what a bummer. Izuku. Izuku nearly jumped and clung onto the ceiling like a cat when his mom's frantic voice sounded from behind him. He turned and watched her trip and fall onto her knees. It's here. It's really here. In her hand, which she was extending to him, was a letter from UA High. Izuku sat at his desk, trying to calm himself. He'd done all he could, put in his very best effort. He saved someone. More than one person, actually. He closed his eyes and tore open the envelope, opening his eyes as he heard a little click on his desk. He eyed the little disc in confusion before it lit up. I am here. As a projection. Wah. All Might. I thought this letter was from UA. Izuku stammered. His mentor was wearing a yellow pinstriped suit, looking every bit the hero everyone knew him as. It's been a while. Sorry for the radio silence. But there was a whole lot to deliberate on. He bowed to the camera and to Izuku. My apologies. But I could say nothing until now since we're about to make the official announcement. I'm here in this town for one reason. As of this moment, I am a teacher at UA High. Izuku gaped at the screen before furrowing his brow as All Might turned to look at someone else. Huh? What's that? Get to the point. Whatever I want to say to him can be said later. But you'll edit it in post-production? Okay, guess it can't be helped. He turned back to the main camera and to Izuku. Midoriya Shonen, you scored very well on the written exam, but a goose egg in the practicals means an obvious result. I'm sorry. Izuku's eyes went wide and tears started prickling in them. No way. That's just not right. Even after everything. He clenched his fists. Is what I would say if that were the end of the story. Izuku froze and looked back at the floating screen. I may have been an entertainer in a past life. Shonen. Observe. The camera zoomed out, revealing a screen behind All Might. The nice girl. Izuku gasped as he stared at her. Please, that boy in the green tracksuit. The one with curly, dark green hair and freckles. I thought he looked kind of plain at first, but when the test started, he started shining like a star. Do you know the one? She had a determined look on her face and leaned forward while clenching her hands at her side. Please, I want to give him my points. He was the biggest hero in that entire exam. He saved me and lost all of his points because of it. It's not fair for him to fail. At least as many points as he lost saving me. Please. She had squeezed her eyes shut. Please. All Might turned back to the camera as Izuku stared at her, his heart thudding in his chest and tears licking at the corners of his eyes. You are more than just your quirk and your strength, Shonen. You have the power to move the hearts of others. He crossed his arms in an X in front of his chest with a massive grin on his face. We were not just looking for combat ability in this exam. Villain points were just one aspect of it, and that trap villain did not take away any points. It was merely worth nothing. Izuku began to cry in earnest as Present Mike appeared on the screen with the girl. I'm afraid we can't give him any of your points, little listener. He ruffled her hair proudly, but there's no need to worry. All Might beamed at him. Not only do you keep every point you earned during the examination, but you've earned even more with your heroic actions. A hero course that rejects those who save others and do the right thing could never be called a hero course. This isn't all for the cameras. Heroics isn't about lip service. In this job, you risk your life and put your money where your mouth is. It's all about turning that lip service into reality. Hero points. He roared, and the video changed to a darkened room where people were holding up scorecards. They are awarded by a panel of judges and are another fundamental way for UA to evaluate you. Izuku saw nothing but high scores, 7s minimum. The screen changed again, this time to what must have been exam rankings. And right at the top was his own name. Number 1 is Izuku Midoriya. Villain points, 52. Hero points, 89. Total, 141. All Might was grinning as broadly as Izuku was gaping. First place. With such an effort, You weren't only gunning for my own high score. You just barely edged it out. He was trembling and trying to see through his tears, quickly wiping them away and gazing at the screen. Number 2, Katsuki Bakugo. Villain points, 108. Hero points, 0. Total, 108. He couldn't quite bite back the snort that erupted from him, and it sent some snot onto his desk to be cleaned up later. Of course, Kakin would more than double his own villain score. Hell, his villain score beat Izuku's hero score, and it was the best one on the list. Number 3, Achiko Uraraka. Villain points, 28. Hero points, 50. Total, 78. So that was her name. Izuku yelled, as All Might explained that, for her willingness to give up all her points if it meant he would get in on top of saving him from splattering on the pavement. Uraraka had earned 50 points. Number 4, Eijiro Kirishima. Villain points, 39. Hero points, 35. Total, 74. That was an unfamiliar name, and he could go no further before the screen changed. He had to find out if it was possible to rewind this thing, so he could check the others. You both pass. All Might said over his shoulder, his back to the camera. He turned around and held his out hand. Come, Midoriya Shonen. This is your Hero Academia. Izuku wiped his fresh set of tears away. Yes, sir. He cried at the projection, before grabbing his phone and racing from his room. He had his mom to squeeze the life out of with a hug. Or would it be the reverse, knowing her? And Anesa to call. What a set of exams. One person exclaimed as they stared up at the monitor depicting the scores from this year's test. You're telling me, this one kid somehow managed over 100 points with literally 0 hero points. Something must have lit a fire up this kid's behind. The other kids were slowing down by the second half, but he somehow just seemed like he was getting faster. They stared at the picture which would be on Katsuki's ID card. At least in terms of combat potential, he certainly seemed like he had earned that smug smirk. He got second place and not a hero point to speak of. Faye, boring. We've seen guys like that before. Another commented, I'm more interested in Midoriya. He could have matched that type of score if he focused entirely on beating down villains. He not only took down the trap bot, but he also gave us a lovely new canyon. Don't remind me. Another grumbled. Even after a couple hours yesterday, I still haven't finished filling that in. The speaker was blocky. Like, literally blocky. He looked like an anthropomorphic block of cement. His own power seemed to hurt him, though. One of them pointed out, he was clutching his head and howling like he was getting tortured after finishing the trap bot. Only one person didn't join in on the discussion. He had nondescript black clothes, unkempt black hair, and a completely exhausted look on his face. His arms were crossed as he stared at the top 10 scorers. What a racket. He turned away and walked out of the room without another glance. All Might. Izuku yelled as he touched down on Dagoba's newly cleaned beach. Blood spewed from between Tashinori's teeth. Who's that? Immediately, a couple who had decided to come view the waves underneath a large beach canopy started freaking out about his hero form. Repeat after me. Just my eyes playing tricks. Izuku had also stiffened up and yelled out, sorry, was just a mirage. They both sighed in relief as the couple turned away, disappointed. Tashinori grinned and held his hand up for a high five. Good job, Shonen. You performed extremely well. You even beat my old high score by a couple points. Izuku high-fived back, but instead of being grateful he hissed, Toshi, you jerk. You had me and Anesa angsting for a week. Tashinori coughed up a little blood at seeing the irritation on his student's face. Sorry, kid. I really was insanely busy. I couldn't even feel my hand after all the paperwork I had to do. And I would have gotten in trouble if I had told you about it beforehand anyway. He grinned sneakily, though to be honest, in retrospect it would have been a pretty good prank if I had done it intentionally. We had already printed out Shiketsu applications. Izuku waved his arms up and down. Tashinori blanched before Izuku deflated with a sigh. Still, when it finally came, it felt so great. You guys played up the trap villain perfectly. You had everyone fooled. And you took it out. Tashinori ruffled his hair with a giant grin. I couldn't have been prouder. Students have engaged it in the past, but it's been over a decade since someone wrecked one. You more than earned your placement, Shonen. And if you're wondering, I wasn't a judge. I figure you're the type to worry about favoritism. He then shined a look of worry on Izuku. How are you feeling, though? You were in an incredible bout of pain from what I saw. Yeah. Izuku rubbed the back of his head wearily. My head felt like it was going to explode. I hope that kind of pain is something that'll go away with training and increasing my limits. I couldn't even move afterwards, and I wasn't really able to even use my quirk again until this morning. It is very likely that you will. Tashinori replied, one for all. It was much the same for my master. Strangely, I got the hang of using it at 100% almost instantly, but she told me the first time she used it, she had a shattered arm and needed a healing quirk to fix it. It's likely you would have had the same happen to you, since each time it passes on, the baseline is much stronger than the previous baseline. You would have been able to just heal it with your flames of regeneration, though. I would have still felt the pain, though. Izuku deadpanned, not quite glaring at his master. No pain, no gain. My own teacher. He seized up, and Izuku watched as a full-body shudder ran through Tashinori. You know what? Never mind that last thought. He smirked and gave Izuku a thumbs up. What's important now is that you temper your vessel. Quirks are a lot like muscles. Unless something causes them to mutate unexpectedly, they generally don't just randomly grow new abilities or powers. The only way to make them stronger is to make yourself stronger. Well, unless you're creative and discover more ways to use it, of course. Generally, the more you use it, the more you'll be able to handle at your peak. Muscles can tear, you know. Izuku looked a little unimpressed. What if I strained too hard and set myself back? Tashinori grinned, and all of a sudden, he was huge. Let's put that theory to the test then, shall we, Shonen? He vanished in a burst of pure speed, and a second later Izuku had to cover his eyes and stumbled back as a wall of wind almost knocked him on his behind. When he opened them again, he saw his old nemesis, the big rig. When you finished cleaning this beach, moving this truck from its location up to where we were collecting the trash to be taken away took you a grand total of 3 minutes and 17 seconds. You were also trembling like a leaf from the first 30 seconds. He took out his phone and clicked onto the stopwatch feature. Let's see some improvement, Shonen. Izuku threw his hand up and focused, the emerald glow of his quirk enveloping him. Slowly, the truck lifted up, but Izuku immediately noticed that All Might was right. He wasn't straining nearly as hard as he had the last time he'd moved it. It was also moving more quickly, though it was still a ponderous pace. All Might grinned as the truck touched down, before turning his phone to Izuku, 1:53s. Izuku started to beam as he caught his breath. Excellent work, Shonen. Holy shit, did All Might take a student? The odd voice of the male of the couple from earlier screamed out.